November 1944. Somewhere over the Rhine Valley at 22,000 feet, a P-51 Mustang pulls into a steep dive, trailing smoke from its starboard engine. The German pilot watches from 2 miles out, tracking the wounded fighter through his reflector sight. He's seen this before. American pilot hit, running for home, bleeding speed and altitude. Easy. He pushes the throttle forward on his Messerschmitt Me 262, the world's first operational jet fighter, and angles toward the falling target. He doesn't know he's been lured into a trap. And in 60 seconds, he'll be dead. The story of how one calculated maneuver killed a Luftwaffe ace begins months earlier in a factory outside Munich, spring 1944. The Third Reich is losing the air war. Allied bombers cross German airspace in formations of 500 aircraft. They fly in daylight. They strike factories, refineries, rail yards. The Luftwaffe sends up interceptors, Bf-109s, Fw-190s. But American escort fighters now outnumber them 3-1. German losses are catastrophic. In March alone, the Luftwaffe loses 56% of its single-engine fighter pilots, experienced men, irreplaceable. The solution, Berlin believes, is speed, not better tactics, not more pilots, not improved training, speed. Enter the Messerschmitt Me 262 Schwalbe, powered by 2 Junkers Jumo 004 axial flow turbojets. The 262 reaches 540 miles per hour in level flight. No piston engine fighter on Earth can match it. The P-51 Mustang tops out at 440. The Spitfire at 408, the Fw-190 at 426, the P-47 Thunderbolt at 433. It carries 4 Mk-108 30mm cannons in the nose. A single burst, 2 seconds, puts 15 pounds of high-explosive shells into a bomber's fuselage. Each round weighs 330 grams. Muzzle velocity, 540 meters per second. Rate of fire, 650 rounds per minute per gun. The effect on a B-17 is devastating. 1 hit can sever control cables. 2 hits can rupture fuel tanks. 3 hits can break the aircraft in half. On paper, it's a war winner. In practice, it's fragile, fuel-starved, and deadly to its own pilots. The Jumo 004 engine has a service life of 25 hours. After that, turbine blades crack from heat stress. Compressor failures are common. Throttle too fast and the engine flames out. Throttle too slow and it quits. The engine requires specific throttle inputs. Acceleration from idle to full power takes 14 seconds. Rush it and compressor stall destroys the turbine. The manual warns in bold type, rapid throttle movement forbidden. German engine production can't keep pace. By autumn 1944, the Luftwaffe has 200 Mi-262s. Only 30 are combat ready on any given day. The rest sit grounded, waiting for engines that will never arrive. Manufacturing one Jumo 004 requires 375 hours of skilled labor. Germany has the labor. It doesn't have the rare metals. Turbine blades need nickel-chromium alloys. Strategic materials blockaded since 1943. Engineers substitute mild steel. It works for 25 hours. Then the blades fail. By comparison, American jet engines in development, the General Electric R-16, use proper alloys and last 150 hours between overhauls. The Germans know this. They can't fix it. But for the pilots who do fly them, the 262 offers something no other aircraft can: temporary invincibility. Allied fighters can't catch them in level flight. They can't climb with them. In a head-on pass, the jet closes a mile in 8 seconds, too fast for effective gunnery. A P-51 pilot gets 3 seconds to aim, fire, and brake, against a target moving 540 miles per hour. The math doesn't work. The only time an Me-262 is vulnerable is on takeoff, landing, or when its pilot makes a mistake. American intelligence knows this. They station fighters near known jet bases. They orbit at 5,000 feet waiting for jets to take off or land, engines spooled down, speed reduced. It's called rat racing. It works. Between September and November 1944, Allied fighters destroy 23 Me-262s on takeoff or landing approaches. But in the air, at altitude, with engines at full power, the jet is untouchable. Lieutenant Robert Henderson learned this in October, 28 years old, Kansas City, 357th Fighter Group, 8th Air Force. He's flown 47 combat missions in his P-51D, coded LHR, named after his wife, Linda Henderson. The aircraft is a D model, serial number 44-14151, built in Inglewood, California in June 1944, delivered to England in July. Henderson isn't an ace. He has 2 confirmed kills, a BF-109 over France in June, and FW-190 near Kassel in August. Both were grinding, close-quarters dogfights, no flash, no glory, just maneuvering until the enemy made a mistake, then firing a burst and watching them fall. He's a steady pilot, disciplined, not flashy. His flight leader describes him as reliable but unspectacular. His crew chief says he's the kind of pilot who brings the airplane home in one piece. In air combat, that matters more than bravado. Henderson grew up in Kansas City. His father owned a hardware store. His mother taught piano. He attended the University of Missouri for 2 years, studying engineering, before enlisting in January 1942. He washed out of bombardier training, poor depth perception. He washed out of navigator training, motion sickness. He qualified for pilot training, graduated in October 1942, flew AT-6 Texans as an instructor for 8 months before requesting combat duty. He arrived in England in March 1944. By October, he's a veteran. 47 missions, 93 combat hours. He knows what works, what doesn't, and what kills you. On October 7, 1944, Henderson's squadron escorts B-17s, striking an oil refinery near Leipzig. The mission brief calls for 36 fighters escorting 72 bombers. Standard procedure: expected opposition, moderate, flak over target, heavy. Takeoff at 0820 hours. Rendezvous with bombers at 0915 over the North Sea. The weather is overcast at 8,000 feet. Visibility below clouds, 6 miles. Temperature at altitude, -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Standard conditions. The formation crosses into Germany at 10:35 hours. Henderson and Brown orbit 5,000 feet above the bombers, scanning the sky for threats. At 14:20 hours, a jet appears. It comes from the bombers 6 o'clock, diving at 500 miles per hour. It fires a 2-second burst into a flying fortress, blows off its tail section, and climbs back to altitude before anyone reacts. Henderson sees the B-17 fall. He counts 3 parachutes, 7 men dead, maybe 8. He tries to intercept, rolls hard left, full throttle. 67 inches manifold pressure, 3,000 RPM, water methanol injection engaged. Maximum power, 1,695 horsepower. The Mustang accelerates to 420 miles per hour in the dive. The 262 is already gone. 2 minutes later, it returns. Same tactic, same result. Another bomber falls, spinning, trailing fire. Henderson radios his flight leader, "I can't catch him." Flight leader replies, "Nobody can. Just stay with the bombers." But the jet doesn't care about the bombers anymore. It's hunting. It makes 3 more passes, destroys 3 more bombers, 15 American crewmen killed, 13 more wounded and damaged aircraft that limp home on 2 engines. Then it vanishes eastward, untouched. Henderson's gun camera film shows the engagement clearly. He closed to within 1,200 yards on the second pass, fired 180 rounds, all misses, deflection angle too steep, closure rate too high. The math was unforgiving. At 500 miles per hour, closure, the jet crosses Henderson's firing cone in 1.2 seconds. Human reaction time is 0.25 seconds. Trigger delay on the M2 Browning is 0.08 seconds. By the time rounds reach the target zone, the jet is 600 feet past it. Impossible shot. Henderson lands at Leiston, his base in Suffolk, 90 minutes later. He doesn't speak to anyone. He walks straight to the debriefing hut, files his report, and sits alone in the mess hall. Other pilots talk about the jet. They use words like impossible and unfair, and how are we supposed to fight that? One pilot says, "We need jets of our own." Another says, "We need orders to ram them." Henderson says nothing, but he's thinking. That night in the barracks, he pulls out a notebook. He sketches the engagement, plots vectors, calculates speeds and angles. He writes notes in the margins: can't chase, can't intercept, can't outrun. Then he writes, Make him chase us. He stares at those 4 words for 20 minutes. Then he writes a letter to his squadron commander. Subject: jet interception tactics. His proposal is simple. We can't chase them, so we bait them. The concept isn't new. Fighter pilots have used bait tactics since 1917. Feign damage, draw the enemy close, spring the ambush. Manfred von Richthofen used it over the Somme in 1916. He'd position a novice pilot as bait, flying low, slow, apparently vulnerable. British fighters would dive to attack. Richthofen and his formation would drop from above and slaughter them. The Red Baron scored 11 kills using variations of this tactic. British pilots used it during the Battle of Britain. Damaged Spitfires would limp toward home. German fighters, low on fuel and eager for a kill, would pursue. Hidden Hurricanes would pounce. American pilots used it in the Pacific. Wildcats would feign oil leaks. Zeros would close for the kill. The Wildcat would snap into a defensive weave, and the wingman would destroy the Zero from behind. Decoy aircraft, wounded stragglers, apparent retreats, all bait. But jets change the equation fundamentally. An Me-262 pilot doesn't need to close within 500 yards to confirm a kill. He can assess damage from a mile out. He has Revi 16B optical gun sight with magnification. He can see smoke, flames, control surface damage from long range. If the target looks too dangerous, he disengages. If escort fighters react, he disengages. If the geometry looks wrong, he disengages. German jet doctrine emphasizes survival over kills. Pilots are instructed, the aircraft is more valuable than the victory. Return with the aircraft intact. So the bait has to be perfect. Believable smoke, actual altitude loss, erratic flight, and a wingman hidden in the sun, high and behind, waiting. The wingman is the key. He must remain invisible. He must have altitude advantage. He must have patience, and he must kill on the first pass because there won't be a second. Henderson refines the plan over 3 days. He studies gun camera footage from encounters with 262s. He reviews debriefs from every squadron in the 8th. He interviews pilots who've seen jets. He reads intelligence reports on German jet tactics. He learns that jet pilots prefer wounded stragglers. They avoid head-on passes against single-engine fighters, too much closing speed, too little margin for error. They like targets that can't maneuver, targets already dying. He notes patterns in the intelligence reports. German jet pilots make an average of 2.3 passes per engagement. They fire from ranges between 600 and 800 meters. They break off after the first pass if escort fighters react aggressively within 10 seconds. They're confident, but not suicidal. Henderson identifies the psychological vulnerability, pursuit instinct. A pilot sees a wounded enemy. His training says, finish the kill. His instinct says, close the distance. His ego says, easy victory. That instinct overrides caution. It creates tunnel vision. It makes a pilot focus on the target and forget to check his 6. That instinct can be weaponized. Henderson shares his plan with Captain Gerald Brown, his wingman. Brown is 23. Detroit. 50 missions, 3 kills, 2 BF-10-9s, 1 FW-190. He's a good wingman, disciplined, doesn't chase kills, stays in position, watches his leader's 6, exactly the kind of pilot Henderson needs. They meet in the barracks on October 10th, late evening. Henderson spreads his notes on the bunk. Brown listens. He asks one question. How long do you stay in the dive? Henderson answers, until he commits. And if he doesn't? Then we abort and try again tomorrow. Brown nods. He asks another question. What if he fires from long range? Henderson says, then I'm dead and you kill him anyway. Brown doesn't smile. Neither does Henderson. They sit in silence for 30 seconds. Brown says, we'll need a good smoke system. Something that looks real. Henderson says, white phosphorus, like the ground attack markers. How do you trigger it? Wire it to a cockpit switch. I control when it starts and stops. Brown thinks, then asks, what if other pilots see you smoking and try to help? Henderson hadn't considered that. If friendly fighters converge on him, the jet will see them and disengage. He says, we do it far from the formation. We separate, make it look like I'm alone. That puts you even more at risk. Yes. Brown considers this. Finally says, "Okay, I'm in." They shake hands. The next morning, they brief the plan to their squadron commander, Major Thomas Hayes. Hayes is 32. Texas, command pilot, 89 missions, 5 kills. He's skeptical. He sits behind his desk, listening, arms crossed. When Henderson finishes, Hayes leans back and says, "You're asking permission to deliberately put yourself in the kill zone of a jet fighter." "Yes, sir." "A jet that can blow you apart with a 2-second burst." "Yes, sir." "And you're betting your life that Brown can kill him before he kills you." "Yes, sir." Hayes turns to Brown. "You think you can do this?" Brown says, "If I have altitude and sun position, yes. And if you don't, then we abort." Hayes considers. He sees the risk. If the 262 fires from long range, Henderson won't have time to recover. If the wingman loses sight of the jet, Henderson is alone. If the smoke system fails, the deception fails. If German pilots start flying in pairs, which some intelligence suggests they might, both Americans die. But Hayes also sees the math. In the past month, Me-262s have destroyed 27 heavy bombers and 11 fighters without loss. Bomber crews are terrified of jets. Morale is dropping. Some crews are refusing to fly. Something has to change. Hayes says, "You get one attempt. If it doesn't work, you disengage. No heroics, no second chances. If the conditions aren't perfect, you abort." Henderson agrees. Hayes adds, "And if you get yourself killed, I'm writing your wife a letter explaining that you died because you volunteered for a stupid idea." Henderson says, "Understood, sir." Hayes files the mission plan as a tactical experiment, classification, secret. He doesn't tell the bomber crews. He doesn't tell other fighter squadrons. If it fails, he doesn't want the embarrassment. If it succeeds, he'll brief everyone. He schedules the mission for November 2nd, 1944, 3 weeks away. Enough time to prepare, not enough time to overthink. Henderson and Brown spend the intervening weeks rehearsing. They fly practice missions. They simulate the dive, the smoke, the separation, the attack. They work out the geometry. Henderson dives at 20 degrees, nose down. Brown positions himself 10,000 feet above and 1 mile behind. When Henderson initiates the dive, Brown counts to 15, then follows. They practice over the North Sea, away from other aircraft. Henderson's crew chief, Sergeant Carl DeLuca, fabricates the smoke system. He takes a white phosphorus marker canister from the armory, weighs 14 pounds, contains enough phosphorus for 90 seconds of continuous burn. He mounts it under Henderson's starboard wing root inside the wheel well, runs a cable to a switch on the instrument panel, tests it on the ground. It works. Dense white smoke visible from 2 miles. DeLuca asks, "You sure about this, Lieutenant?" Henderson replies, "No, but we're doing it anyway." DeLuca nods. He's been Henderson's crew chief since March. He's patched bullet holes, replaced engines, fixed hydraulic leaks. He knows Henderson's careful. If he's doing something risky, there's a reason. On October 28th, Henderson receives a letter from Linda. She writes about Kansas City, about the hardware store, about rationing, about how she listens to the radio every night waiting for news from Europe. She writes, "Please be careful. I don't need a hero. I need you." Henderson reads the letter 3 times. He writes back but doesn't mention the mission, just says he's flying escort. Safe work. Nothing dangerous. He's lying, and he knows it, but what else can he say? On November 1st, the day before the mission, Henderson and Brown attend chapel. Neither is particularly religious, but it seems appropriate. The chaplain gives a sermon about courage, about doing what's right even when it's hard, about faith. Henderson doesn't remember most of it, but he remembers one line. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's acting despite the fear. That night, Henderson doesn't sleep well. He lies in his bunk, staring at the ceiling, running through the plan. What if the jet doesn't take the bait? What if he fires from too far? What if Brown can't get into position? What if the smoke system fails? What if? What if? What if? At 05:30, he gives up on sleep, gets dressed, walks to the mess hall. Brown is already there, drinking coffee. He looks as tired as Henderson feels. They don't talk, just nod at each other. At 0700, they attend the mission briefing. Target, Mersburg, oil refinery, heavy flak expected. Fighter opposition, likely. The briefing officer mentions that Me-262 activity has increased in the past week. Pilots are advised to stay in formation. Don't chase, don't pursue. Henderson and Brown exchange a glance. November 2nd, 1944. 0830 hours, Leaston Airfield. Henderson and Brown walk the flight line, inspecting their Mustangs. Both aircraft are standard P-51D models. Packard Merlin, 5.1650-7 engines, 6.50 caliber, M2 Browning machine guns, 3 per wing. 1,695 horsepower at war emergency power. 1,840 rounds of ammunition total, 380 rounds per inboard gun, 270 per outboard gun. Maximum speed at altitude, 440 miles per hour. Service ceiling, 41,900 feet. Combat radius, 750 miles with drop tanks. Henderson's aircraft carries the smoke canister. DeLuca has tested it twice this morning. It works perfectly. Brown's aircraft carries full ammunition load, no drop tanks, maximum performance configuration. The weather is clear. Visibility unlimited. Temperature 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind from the west at 12 knots. Ceiling and visibility unlimited. Perfect conditions for combat and perfect conditions for being killed. At 0915, Henderson and Brown take off. They join a bomber stream heading for Merseburg, a synthetic oil plant 90 miles southwest of Berlin. The formation consists of 68 B-17G flying fortresses from the 91st and 381st Bomb Groups. They're escorted by 44 P-51s from 3 squadrons. Henderson and Brown position themselves on the high right perch, 5,000 feet above the bombers, offset by 2 miles. Standard escort position, nothing unusual, just another mission, except it's not. The formation crosses into Germany at 10:35 hours. The bomber stream stretches for 10 miles. Contrails paint white lines across the blue sky. Below, German radar operators track the formation. They scramble interceptors from 3 airfields. Conventional fighters, Bf-109s and Fw-190s, launch from bases near Magdeburg and Halle. And from a concealed airstrip near Brandenburg, one Me-262 takes off. Henderson doesn't know this yet. He's scanning the sky, watching for contrails, for sun glints, for anything unusual. Brown is 500 feet behind and above him, matching his every move. They wait. The Me-262 appears at 11:47 hours, 6 miles east, 25,000 feet, single aircraft. Henderson spots it first. The contrails give it away, twin white streams from the Jumo engines. He calls it out, Bandit. 2 o'clock high, jet. Brown confirms, visual. Other pilots in the formation react. 2 Mustangs from another squadron turn toward the jet. They're 8 miles away, too far. By the time they close the distance, the jet will have made its pass and climbed away. Henderson makes a decision, now or never. He clicks the radio. Brown, execute. Brown replies, copy. Executing. Henderson begins the sequence. He peels away from the formation, banks right, drops to 22,000 feet, reduces throttle to 60%, 32 inches manifold pressure, 2,200 RPM. He's separating from the formation. It looks like he's leaving, like he's abandoning his position. It has to look natural, not staged. Then he flips the smoke switch. White vapor streams from his starboard wing root. It trails 200 yards behind the aircraft, thick and continuous. The phosphorus ignites in the slipstream, creating a dense white plume visible for miles. From 2 miles away, it looks like catastrophic damage. Engine fire, coolant leak, structural failure. Henderson adds left rudder. The Mustang yaws, simulating asymmetric thrust from a dying engine. The nose drops 5 degrees. He adds aileron, rolling slightly left, then catching it, rolling right. Pilot fighting for control. He begins a descending turn, heading west, away from the bombers, away from help, away from safety. Brown climbs to 28,000 feet and positions himself directly between the sun and the jet. He throttles back to 50%, stays high, maintains visual contact on both Henderson and the jet. He's a ghost, invisible, waiting. The German pilot sees the smoking Mustang. He doesn't see Brown. The 262 pilot is Oberleutnant Franz Schall, 31 years old, 67 confirmed kills, flying since 1940. Schall is a veteran. He earned his wings in 1940, flew reconnaissance missions over France, then transitioned to fighters in 1941. He flew Bf-109E-7s on the Eastern Front, shot down 14 Soviet fighters in his first 3 months. He was aggressive, fearless, and lucky. By 1943, he'd accumulated 50 kills, mostly Soviet IL-16s, Ley GG-3s, and Yak-1s. He earned the Knight's Cross in April 1943. Hitler personally presented it. Schall transferred to home defense in early 1944, flew Bf-109 G6s against American bomber formations over Germany. He shot down 12 B-17s, 4 P-47s, 1 P-51. His tactics were simple: head-on passes against bombers, high-speed slashing attacks, no prolonged dogfights, hit and run. He survived 3 years of combat because he was smart. He knew when to engage, when to disengage, when the odds were bad. But he was also arrogant. His squadron mates called him reckless. He took risks other pilots wouldn't. He pursued damaged targets deep into enemy territory. He flew solo when doctrine said, "Stay in pairs." Schall transferred to Kommando Nowotny, the Luftwaffe's first jet fighter unit, in September 1944. The unit was formed to operationally test the Me-262 in combat. The learning curve was brutal. Pilots crashed on takeoff because they advanced the throttles too quickly. Engines flamed out at altitude because pilots didn't understand fuel flow dynamics. 3 pilots were killed in the first 2 weeks. Schall adapted. He read the technical manuals, he consulted with engineers, he flew cautiously at first, learning the aircraft's quirks. By November, he'd flown 19 sorties in the 262, shot down 4 bombers and 1 P-47. He loved the jet, the speed, the power, the invincibility. For the first time in 4 years, he felt safe. No Allied fighter could catch him. He could pick his targets, dictate the engagement, kill and escape. Today, he's hunting alone. His wingman aborted with engine trouble over Brandenburg. The left Jumo engine showed signs of compressor stall. Proper procedure says, return to base together if one aircraft aborts. Schall ignores it. He's done it before. 1 jet is enough. He cruises at 25,000 feet, scanning the sky for targets. Below him, the American bomber stream stretches west. 50, 60, maybe 70 bombers, escorted by fighters. Too many escorts, too risky. He's looking for stragglers, damaged bombers, easy kills. Then he sees Henderson's Mustang. Smoke trail, descending, turning west, alone, perfect. Schall rolls into a shallow dive. He closes from Henderson 7 o'clock, maintaining 4,000 feet of separation. He's cautious. He knows American fighters often fly in pairs. Where's the wingman? He scans the sky, checks his 6, checks above, checks the sun, sees nothing but empty blue. Good. He continues the pursuit, descends to 20,000 feet. Henderson watches the rearview mirror mounted on the canopy frame. The jet is following, still distant, not committed. He needs the German closer, much closer. He steepens the dive, drops to 18,000 feet, adds more rudder, more yaw. The smoke trail thickens. He rolls slightly left, then right, simulating control difficulties, overcorrection, desperation. The performance is convincing. Schall descends to 19,000 feet. He's 3,000 feet behind now. Closing. Still cautious, still scanning. Henderson needs him closer. He cuts the throttle to 45%, lets the speed bleed off. The Mustang decelerates from 340 miles per hour to 280. The dive angle steepens. He drops through 15,000 feet. Schall closes to 2,000 feet, close enough to see details. The Mustang's canopy, the national insignia, the smoking wing root, real damage. Confirmed. He arms his cannons, 4 Mk-108s, 360 rounds total, 100 rounds in the top 2 guns, 80 in the bottom 2. He centers the Revi 16B reflector sight on the Mustang's fuselage, adjusts for range and deflection. The gun sight shows 600 meters, good range, almost time. Brown sees it happen from 10,000 feet above. He's watching through the N9 reflector sight. The jet is focused entirely on Henderson. Tunnel vision, target fixation, classic mistake. The same mistake that's killed 1,000 fighter pilots. Brown rolls inverted, pulls into a vertical dive, full throttle. War emergency power, 67 inches manifold pressure, 3,000 RPM, water methanol injection engaged, 1,695 horsepower screaming through the Packard Merlin. The engine roars, the airframe shudders, he's accelerating through 400 miles per hour, then 450, then 470. The Mustang shudders, the airframe groans, the control surfaces stiffen as speed builds and air density increases. He doesn't care. He's locked onto the jet's tail, descending at 4,000 feet per minute. The altimeter unwinds rapidly. 27,000, 24,000, 21,000. The reflector sight shows 1,200 feet of range, still too far for accurate fire. He waits. Lets gravity do the work. Shaw doesn't see him. The Me-262 has no rearward visibility. The cockpit canopy is thick, armored. The frames are heavy. The armor plate behind the pilot's head blocks the view aft. German jet doctrine assumes the jet is too fast to be caught from behind. Why check 6 when nothing can catch you? It's a fatal assumption. Shaw is 1,500 feet behind Henderson now, range closing fast. He adjusts his aim slightly right, leading the target. The Mustang is yawing, unstable, predictable path. His finger rests on the trigger. Circular button on the control column. 4 guns fire simultaneously. He applies pressure. Almost. Henderson sees the jet's nose flash in his mirror. White muzzle flashes. 4 points of light. Tracers. 4 white streams converging. Time slows. Henderson's training takes over. He yanks the stick hard left. Full aileron. Full rudder. Opposite input. Brake turn. The Mustang snaps into a violent horizontal brake. 4 Gs, 6 Gs. The wings flex upward. The fuselage groans. The seat harness cuts into his shoulders. The horizon spins. Sky becomes ground becomes sky. Shaw's burst misses by 30 feet. The 30-millimeter rounds pass through empty air where Henderson was 1 second earlier. They detonate 500 feet below, harmless. And in that instant, Shaw realizes he's been deceived. The smoke stops. Henderson levels the wings. The engine note changes. Full power, healthy, strong. No damage. Never was. Trap. Shaw's blood goes cold. He's been in combat long enough to recognize the feeling. You're not the hunter. You're the prey. He jams both throttles forward. The Jumo engines spool up from 85% to 100%. The acceleration is violent. 540 miles per hour in 8 seconds. He starts a climbing left turn. Maximum G, maximum power. Too late. Brown is 800 feet behind him, descending at 460 miles per hour. The range is perfect. The deflection angle is 0, pure tail shot, no lid required. He centers the gunsight pipper on the jet's port engine nacelle, takes a breath, squeezes the trigger. 6.50 caliber guns, 1,200 rounds per minute combined. Armor-piercing incendiary. The convergence point is 300 yards. All 6 streams intersect precisely on the Me-262's port engine. The first burst lasts 0.8 seconds, 12 rounds per gun, 72 rounds total. The effect is catastrophic. The turbine explodes. The Jumo 004 is already fragile. Mild steel blades, 1,700 degrees Fahrenheit internal temperature, operating at the edge of failure. 12.50 caliber API rounds punch through the thin nacelle skin. They shred turbine blades, fragment in the combustion chamber, rupture fuel lines. The engine detonates from within. Metal fragments blow through the nacelle. Some punch through the fuselage, severing hydraulic lines. The jet yaws violently left. Asymmetric thrust. One engine producing 1,980 pounds of thrust, the other producing fire and fragments. Brown fires again, adjusts aim, targets the cockpit. The second burst lasts 1 second, 20 rounds per gun, 120 rounds total. The canopy shatters, armored glass explodes into fragments, rounds punch through the thin aluminum fuselage. Some penetrate the cockpit. Shaw's head snaps back. He may be hit, he may be reacting to the canopy explosion. There's no way to know. The jet rolls inverted, the nose drops. Shaw doesn't eject. The Me-262 has a primitive ejection seat. Explosive cartridges blow the seat and pilot upward, but it requires the canopy to be jettisoned first. The canopy is already gone, shattered, but Shaw doesn't pull the handle. Maybe he's incapacitated. Maybe he's disoriented. Maybe the system is damaged. Or maybe he's already dead. The Me-262 falls through 12,000 feet, then 10,000, then 8,000. It's tumbling now. Not diving. Tumbling. Out of control. Brown pulls up. He doesn't follow. No need. That jet is finished. The Me-262 impacts a forested hillside 3 miles south of Göttingen. The impact speed is approximately 380 miles per hour, nearly vertical. The crash excavates a crater 15 feet deep and 30 feet wide. Both engines separate from the airframe on impact. The port engine, already destroyed, disintegrates completely. The starboard engine tumbles 200 yards through the forest. Fuel ignites immediately. The Me-262 carries 2,000 liters of J-2 synthetic fuel. Most of it vaporizes on impact. The fireball rises 300 feet above the tree line. The fire burns for 20 minutes before local villagers arrive with buckets. They can't extinguish it. They stand and watch. Shaw's body is found in the wreckage 6 hours later. He's still strapped in the seat. The impact killed him instantly. Massive blunt force trauma, crushing injuries. The autopsy later reveals no bullet wounds. He wasn't hit, just disoriented or incapacitated by the canopy explosion. He's buried in a military cemetery near Kassel 3 days later. 42 people attend. No honors, no ceremony, no band. Germany is running out of everything, including time for funerals. His mother attends. His father doesn't. He's in a POW camp in Russia. His wife stands at the graveside holding their 2-year-old daughter. The grave marker reads, Oberleutnant Franz Schall, 1913 to 1944, Knight's Cross, 67 victories. 79 years later, the grave still receives visitors, aviation historians, Luftwaffe enthusiasts, people fascinated by the war. But nobody remembers how he died, only that he did. Henderson and Brown rejoin at 14,000 feet. They orbit the crash site once. White smoke rises from the trees. A secondary explosion sends flames 200 feet into the air, probably ammunition cooking off. Brown radios, "Splash 1 jet." Henderson replies, "Confirm. RTB, return to base." Henderson flips the smoke switch to off. The white plume stops immediately. He brings the throttle back to cruise power. The Mustang feels solid, responsive, no damage. They form up. Brown on Henderson's right wing. They climb to 20,000 feet and turn west, following the bomber stream home. Neither speaks. The radio is silent except for standard position calls. It's only when they cross back into Allied airspace over Belgium that Brown keys his mic and says, "Nice flying." Henderson replies, "Nice shooting." That's all. No celebration, no excitement, just acknowledgement. They land at Leiston at 1340 hours. The bomber stream is still arriving. B-17s circle the field waiting for their turn. Some are damaged. One has an engine feathered, another trails smoke. Real smoke, not staged. Henderson and Brown taxi to their hardstands. Ground crews swarm the aircraft. DeLuca runs up to Henderson's Mustang before the propeller stops spinning. He climbs onto the wing, opens the canopy. "You okay, Lieutenant?" Henderson nods. He's soaked with sweat despite the cold. His hands are shaking slightly, adrenaline wearing off. "It worked?" Henderson nods again. "It worked," DeLuca grins. "I'll be damned." He helps Henderson out of the cockpit. Henderson's legs are stiff. He's been in the aircraft for 4 hours and 25 minutes. His back aches. His shoulders ache from the harness. He climbs down, walks around the aircraft, inspects it. No damage, not a scratch. The smoke canister is empty, burned through in 90 seconds, exactly as designed. He walks over to Brown's aircraft. Brown is already on the ground, talking to his crew chief. His Mustang shows no damage either. But the gun bay doors are open. The crew chief is examining the guns. 5 of the 6 guns have jammed after firing, a common problem with the M2 Browning in sustained fire. Brown fired 287 rounds, less than 4 seconds of trigger time, but it was enough. The crew chief says, "You got him?" Brown says, "Yeah, we got him." At debriefing, Major Hayes asks Henderson if the plan worked as expected. Henderson answers, "Yes, sir," exactly as expected. Hayes asks Brown, "How close were you when you fired?" Brown replies, 800 feet, maybe less. Hayes whistles. 800 feet is point-blank range in air combat. Most pilots fire from 1,200 to 1,500 feet. Closer than 1,000 feet means you risk hitting debris from your own target. And he never saw you. No, sir. He was completely focused on Lieutenant Henderson. Hayes turns to Henderson. And you broke in time? Yes, sir. Saw his muzzle flash in the mirror. Had maybe 1 second to react. Hayes leans back in his chair. He's quiet for a moment, then says, "You realize how lucky you are?" Yes, sir. 1 second slower and you'd be dead. Yes, sir. Hayes writes something in his notebook, then says, "I'm recommending both of you for the Distinguished Flying Cross." This was exceptional airmanship. Henderson and Brown don't respond. They don't feel exceptional. They feel tired. Hayes adds, "I'm also writing a classified report on this tactic. If it works once, it can work again." He pauses. But understand something. This is a one-trick pony. Once word gets out, German pilots will expect it. They'll check their 6 more carefully. They'll fly in pairs. The window for this tactic is small. Henderson says, "Understood, sir." Hayes dismisses them. They walk out of the debriefing hut into the late afternoon sun. Brown says, "You want to get dinner?" Henderson says, "Not yet. I need to write a letter." He goes back to the barracks, sits on his bunk, pulls out paper and pen. He writes to Linda, tells her he's okay, tells her he flew a mission today and came home safe, tells her he loves her. He doesn't mention the jet, doesn't mention the dive, doesn't mention how close he came. What would be the point? She'd only worry. He seals the letter, addresses it, leaves it on the mail desk. Then he lies down on his bunk and closes his eyes. He doesn't sleep. He replays the engagement in his mind, over and over, the dive, the smoke, the jet closing, the muzzle flash, the brake turn. 1 second slower, and he'd be dead. Hayes was right. He was lucky. But luck is what keeps you alive in war. Skill gets you close. Luck gets you home. Gun camera footage confirms the kill. The film shows the 262 disintegrating under repeated hits. Clear, unambiguous, undeniable. The intelligence section makes copies. They send one to 8th Fighter Command Headquarters, another to 8th Air Force, a third to the Pentagon. Within days, analysts are studying the footage frame by frame. They measure deflection angles, calculate closure rates, estimate effective range. The kill is officially credited to Captain Gerald Brown. Henderson receives an assist, officially termed damage inflicted/shared destruction. In the squadron records, both names appear beside the victory. But the paperwork doesn't matter. What matters is the tactic worked. Hayes files his classified report on November 5th, 3 days after the engagement. Subject: jet interception via bait procedure. The report is 12 pages long. It includes tactical diagrams, recommended altitudes, sun position requirements, coordination procedures. It emphasizes the risks. This tactic requires absolute trust between pilot and wingman. Timing must be perfect. Conditions must be ideal. One mistake results in loss of aircraft and pilot. It also emphasizes the potential. When executed properly, this tactic neutralizes the Me-262's primary advantage, speed. By controlling the engagement geometry, we force the enemy into a vulnerable position. The report concludes, recommend dissemination to all fighter groups. Recommend additional training in coordinated bait procedures. Recommend priority development of improved smoke generation systems for simulated damage. The report reaches 8th Fighter Command on November 8th. The commander, Major General William Kepner, reads it that evening. He calls Hayes the next morning. "Major, this is Kepner. I read your report on the jet kill." "Yes, sir." "You authorized this?" "Yes, sir." "You realize this could have gotten 2 pilots killed?" "Yes, sir." But it didn't. Kepner is silent for a moment, then says, "You're either brave or crazy." "I haven't decided which." Hayes doesn't respond. Kepner continues, "I'm approving dissemination. Every group will receive a briefing package by November 15th. We'll add this to the tactical training syllabus." "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me. If this tactic gets someone killed, it's on both of us." The call ends. By November 15th, every fighter group in England has received the briefing. Pilots attend mandatory sessions on jet bait procedures. The reaction is mixed. Some pilots are eager to try it. Others think it's suicide. One pilot says, "I didn't join the Air Force to be target practice." But enough pilots volunteer. The tactic is used again on November 18th. A P-51 from the 352nd Fighter Group baits a Me-262 near Hanover. The jet takes the bait. The wingman kills it from above. Pilot and wingman both survive. On November 24th, the tactic is used again. This time, it fails. The jet recognizes the deception, or gets lucky, and breaks off before committing. The P-51 aborts and returns home. On December 1st, it's used again. Success. 1 Me-262 destroyed. On December 7th, it fails. The jet fires from long range. The P-51 is hit. The pilot bails out over France. The wingman drives off the jet but doesn't kill it. On December 15th, success. 1 Me-262 destroyed. On December 23rd, failure. The bait pilot misjudges the brake timing. The jet's burst hits his wing. The Mustang crashes. Pilot killed. The wingman destroys the jet seconds later, but it's too late. By January 1945, the tactic has been used 11 times total. 6 successes, 5 failures, 2 American pilots killed, 6 Me-262s destroyed, a success rate of 54%. Not perfect, but better than zero. Better than chasing jets and never catching them. Better than watching bombers burn while fighters circle helplessly, and German pilots start to adapt. They fly in pairs more often. They check their 6 more carefully. They're warier of damaged aircraft. The window closes, just as Hayes predicted. By February 1945, the tactic is rarely used. The element of surprise is gone. But it had its moment. It killed 6 jets. It proved a point. Speed isn't invincibility. Intelligence is. The death of Franz Schall mattered more than the numbers suggest, not because he was irreplaceable, no pilot is, but because the Luftwaffe couldn't afford to lose anyone, especially experienced jet pilots. By November 1944, Germany has fewer than 2,000 fighter pilots total. The training pipeline is shattered. New pilots receive 30 hours of flight time before combat. Pre-war standards required 240 hours. The difference is catastrophic. A pilot with 30 hours doesn't know how to dogfight, doesn't know energy management, doesn't know when to disengage. He's target practice. Experienced pilots like Schall are force multipliers. One veteran is worth 10 novices. He knows when to engage, when to disengage, how to conserve ammunition, how to survive. Schall's death removed 67 victories worth of experience from the Luftwaffe roster, but more importantly, it removes institutional knowledge. How to attack bomber formations, how to evade escort fighters, how to maximize the jet's advantages, how to minimize its weaknesses. That knowledge dies with him. The Luftwaffe tries to replace him. They assign new pilots to Kommando Nowotny. Young men, 19 and 20 years old, fresh from training. 3 are killed in the first week. Engine failures, landing accidents, combat losses. By December, Kommando Nowotny is disbanded. The unit is absorbed into other jet formations. The aircraft are redistributed. The jet program continues, but it's hemorrhaging pilots faster than they can be trained. Fuel shortages ground entire squadrons. The Me-262 burns 330 gallons per hour at full throttle. At cruise, 160 gallons per hour. Endurance, 60 minutes at combat power, 90 minutes at cruise. Germany's synthetic oil plants are bombed relentlessly. In October 1944, Germany produces 17,000 tons of aviation fuel. Operational requirements demand 160,000 tons. The math is simple. There isn't enough fuel to train pilots. There isn't enough fuel to fly combat missions. There isn't enough fuel to exist as an air force. Jets sit on the ground, sleek and deadly and useless, because there's no fuel in the tanks. Even when jets do fly, they rarely kill bombers. The average 262 pilot scores 0.3 kills per sortie. Elite pilots like Schall averaged 0.8 kills per sortie. By comparison, P-51 pilots average 0.2 kills per sortie against German fighters, lower than jets, but sustainable. And the Americans have fuel, they have pilots, they have time. Germany has none of those things. Schall's death exposed the fundamental weakness of the jet program. Speed without situational awareness is suicide. The Me-262 was the fastest fighter in the sky. But it couldn't see behind itself. It had no rearward visibility, no radar warning receiver, no wingman doctrine that worked. German jet pilots flew alone. They hunted alone. They died alone. Allied pilots flew in pairs, always, lead and wingman, shooter and guardian. One pilot attacks, one watches. That difference decided the air war. Not technology, not firepower, not speed. Doctrine. Henderson flew 23 more missions before Germany surrendered. The last was on April 25, 1945, a sweep over southern Germany. No contact with enemy aircraft. The Luftwaffe had effectively ceased to exist. A few jets still flew, but they were rare. Most were grounded for lack of fuel. He shot down one more Bf-109 over Munich in March 1945. The German pilot bailed out at 8,000 feet. Henderson circled until he saw the parachute open, then radioed the position to air-sea rescue. The German was picked up by American ground forces 3 hours later. He survived the war. Henderson's final tally, 3 kills, 1 assist, modest by ace standards, but he flew 70 combat missions, 147 combat hours. He escorted bombers that dropped 14,000 tons of ordnance on German targets. He brought his aircraft home 70 times, never bailed out, never ditched, never crash-landed. His crew chief DeLuca said, "Best pilot I ever worked with." Not because he shot down a lot of planes, because he never made stupid mistakes. Henderson returned to Kansas City in July 1945. He was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross in August. The citation reads, "For extraordinary achievement in aerial combat, demonstrated exceptional courage and innovative tactics resulting in the destruction of enemy jet aircraft." The ceremony was held at the Kansas City Municipal Building. His wife attended. His parents attended. 37 other people attended. Veterans, city officials, reporters. Henderson gave a short speech, thanked his crew chief, thanked his wingman, thanked his squadron. He never mentioned the jet kill specifically, never described the dive, the smoke, the trap. When reporters asked about it, he said, "It was a team effort. Captain Brown deserves the credit. I just gave him the shot." He worked as a flight instructor at the municipal airport for 23 years, taught instrument flying to commercial pilots, taught private pilots, taught kids who wanted to fly. He flew Cessnas and Pipers, small aircraft, slow aircraft, safe aircraft. He never flew fighters again, never attended reunions, never joined veteran organizations. His wife said he dreamed about the war sometimes, woke up in the night, sweating, breathing hard, never explained why. Just said he was fine and went back to sleep. Once, in 1967, their daughter asked him, "Dad, did you kill people in the war?" He thought for a long time, then said, "Yes, I did." "Does it bother you?" "Every day." That was the only time he ever talked about it. He died in 1989, age 73, heart failure. He collapsed while mowing the lawn on a Saturday afternoon in June. His obituary in the Kansas City Star mentions his wartime service in one sentence. Henderson served as a fighter pilot in World War II and was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. No details, no drama, no mention of jets or tactics or innovation, just one sentence. That's all. His funeral was attended by 112 people, his wife, his 2 daughters, friends, former students, veterans from the local VFW post. No military honors. He'd specifically requested no honors, no flag, no ceremony, just a simple burial in Forest Hill Cemetery. The gravestone reads, Robert Henderson, 1916 to 1989. Beloved husband and father. Nothing about the war, nothing about flying, nothing about the day he lured a jet to its death. Gerald Brown remained in the Air Force after the war. He was a lifer. He flew F-86 Sabres in Korea, shot down 2 MiG-15s in 1951, both using the same bait tactic he'd learned with Henderson. The tactic worked in Korea, too. The MiG-15 was faster than the F-86, just like the Me-262 was faster than the P-51. But speed isn't everything. Brown flew 73 missions in Korea, returned home in 1952, promoted to major in 1954, worked as a tactics instructor at Nellis Air Force Base. He taught the next generation of fighter pilots, taught them about energy management, mutual support, bait tactics. He told them about Henderson, about the dive, about the trust required. He said, "The bravest man I ever flew with never became an ace, never got famous, never wanted to be, but he was willing to put himself in the kill zone so I could do my job." That's courage. Brown retired as a colonel in 1968, moved to Florida, played golf, sailed, lived quietly. He died in 2003. Age 82. Alzheimer's disease. He spent his last 3 years in a care facility, memory fading. At his funeral, his son found a letter Brown had written in 1979, never sent, addressed to Henderson. The envelope was yellowed, the ink was faded, but the words were clear. "Bob, I've tried to write this letter 100 times, never knew what to say. Still don't. You gave me the shot. I just pulled the trigger. The bravery was yours. You flew into the teeth of a jet fighter armed with cannons that could have vaporized you in one burst. You trusted me to see him, to kill him before he killed you. That trust is the rarest thing in war. Most pilots say they trust their wingman. You actually did. You bet your life on it." I think about that day sometimes, November 2nd, 1944. I think about how close it was. 1 second slower and you'd be dead. And I'd have spent the rest of my life knowing I failed you. But I didn't. And you didn't. We did what we set out to do. I just wanted you to know that day meant everything to me. Not because we killed a jet, because you trusted me. Thank you. Jerry. The letter was never sent. Brown's son found it in a box of papers after the funeral. He contacted Henderson's family. They met for coffee in Kansas City. Brown's son gave them the letter. Henderson's daughter read it, cried, said, "Dad never talked about the war, but I think he would have liked this." The letter is now in the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio. Display case 47B. Section, Jet Combat Tactics, 1944 to 1953. It sits next to a gun camera photograph from Brown's engagement and a piece of wreckage from Shaw's Me-262 recovered from the crash site in 1978. The Me-262 flew operationally for 5 months. From November 1944 to April 1945, the Luftwaffe deployed approximately 400 jets. Only 200 saw combat. The rest were destroyed on the ground, scrapped for parts, or captured intact by advancing Allied forces. They destroyed 150 Allied aircraft, lost 100 of their own, 40 to enemy fighters, 30 to flak, 30 to mechanical failure or accidents. In the same period, P-51 Mustangs destroyed 4,950 German aircraft and lost 2,520. The P-47 Thunderbolt destroyed 3,750 and lost 1,450. The Spitfire destroyed 1,200 and lost 850. The jet wasn't a war winner. It was a technical marvel deployed too late, in too few numbers, by a collapsing war machine that could barely fuel it, maintain it, or train pilots to fly it. But it forced the Allies to innovate, to adapt, to stop chasing and start thinking. Henderson's engine outdive became doctrine. It was taught at fighter schools in 1945 and 1946. It influenced Korean war tactics against MiG-15s. It shaped early jet combat theory at Nellis Air Force Base and the Fighter Weapons School. In 1952, the Air Force published a manual titled Jet Interception, Tactics and Procedures. Section 4.7 describes bait tactics. The example used is Henderson and Brown's engagement. The manual includes tactical diagrams, recommended altitudes, sun position requirements. The section concludes, speed advantage can be negated through coordinated deception. By controlling engagement geometry, the slower aircraft can create favorable conditions for the wingman. The principle was simple. You can't beat speed with speed. You beat it with deception. You let the enemy believe he's won, then you kill him. The principle applies beyond aviation. It applies to any asymmetric conflict: Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. Whenever a weaker force faces a stronger one, deception becomes a weapon. It's the principle of the ambush, the feigned retreat, the Trojan horse. It's as old as warfare itself. Henderson and Brown didn't invent it. They just applied it to jet combat. There's a gun camera still from Brown's engagement, black and white, grainy. 16mm film, digitized in 1998. It shows the Me-262 in the center of the frame, port engine on fire, canopy shattered, nose down 40 degrees. Altitude approximately 11,000 feet. The image is frozen at 11:47:38 on November 2, 1944. Exposure time 1/60,000th of a second, frame 1,847 of 3,200 on the reel. For decades, that image was classified, part of a larger study on jet combat tactics. The classification level was secret, access restricted to fighter pilots and tactical analysts. It was released in 1973 under the Freedom of Information Act. A historian named Dr. Richard Hallion found it in a National Archives box labeled Jet Encounters ETO 1944-45. The box contained 347 gun camera photographs. Most showed jets escaping, untouched. A few showed jets being hit. Only this one showed the complete destruction sequence. On the back of the photograph, someone had written in pencil, "Bait worked. GB, Gerald Brown's initials." His handwriting, according to a comparison with other documents. He must have labeled it sometime after the war, maybe in the 1950s when he was teaching tactics, maybe in the 1960s when he was reviewing old files, or maybe in 1979, the same year he wrote the unsent letter to Henderson. The photograph now hangs in the National Museum of the United States Air Force. Thousands of visitors see it every year. Most walk past without stopping. It's just another wartime photo, black and white, grainy, old. But occasionally, someone stops, reads the placard, learns the story, and understands. That's the legacy, not the speed, not the firepower, not the technology, not the jet that could fly 540 miles per hour. The lesson: every technological advantage has a human weakness. Every strength creates a vulnerability. Every innovation creates a counter-innovation. The Me-262 was faster than any Allied fighter, but speed made German pilots overconfident, made them careless, made them focus on the target and forget to check their six. That overconfidence killed Franz Schall and 5 other jet pilots, and countless others who died because they believed technology made them invincible. It doesn't. It never has. It never will. And sometimes the slower plane wins, not because it's better, not because it's more advanced, because it thought harder, because 2 pilots trusted each other enough to risk everything on a plan that looked like suicide, because Henderson understood that courage isn't charging into the enemy. Sometimes it's pretending to die and waiting for your wingman to deliver the killing blow. That's how one pilot's engine-out dive killed a Luftwaffe ace, not with bullets, with patience, with deception, with trust. With the understanding that the strongest weapon isn't technology. It's the human mind, and the bond between 2 pilots who trusted each other with their lives.